Hello, degenerates, freaks, geeks, basement dwellers, fools, and, random, unintelligent, and oh so tiring internet people. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And we're gonna take a look at Kursk up front, because maybe Russia is about to step into a world of hurt, considering that Ukraine has had 8 months to prepare for falling back out of Kursk into Sumy Oblast and expecting Russia to follow them, right? Is Russia stepping into a trap at Kursk? And after that, we will take a look at the comment section. The Vatniks, they're gonna go apeshit loco. They're gonna hate it. They're gonna leave so many fun comments. So go down, check them out, and it's gonna be awesome. And we're gonna continue along the front line. Because goddamn it, Ukraine is securing critical advances along the entire front line from Kupiansk all the way to Kherson. Really interesting stuff is going on. So, despite everything with Trump backstabbing Zelensky and making life a living hell for the Ukrainians, um, on the front line, things may be slowly turning around. No wonder if the Russians rely on donkeys and Ladas instead of trucks and armored vehicles. But it is what it is. Let's take a look at the front line. Right, so deep states map, 4th of March, and let's see what happens here. Ukraine is holding on, moving ahead. On the 6th, we get this crossing. I was talking about this for ages at the Krylovka. They got across finally, got into a valley here. If we change the map, it's easier to see. You can see they've gained access here to this valley. And if we then move ahead a day, and boom, then they push strongly along the valley, cutting the logistics here. Logistics are coming in from Unakivka along this brown dirt road right here into Russia over here. So Russia moves in, cuts the logistics into Sucha. Ukraine now only has this route from Unakivka to Sucha to rely upon. It's easy for Russia to allocate the artillery, airstrikes, and more importantly, drones to hunt down everything moving along this road. And as a consequence, Ukraine begins to fall back because at this point they can't hold on. And then we are on the 12th, basically a week ago, and not much else has happened, right? Ukraine is currently, by the looks of it, holding the line and has been holding the line for a couple of days. And the reason is, of course, that Ukraine had planned for this before pushing into Kursk and had 8 months to prepare for this situation. Ukraine wanted, or they tried to grab Sudzha, they tried to grab Kornevo and Glushkovo and the counties associated with these three towns, larger settlements. They only grabbed Sudzha, as we know, and almost took Kornevo, and well, all out failed with Glushkovo. But the plan was to take these three towns and hold for as long as possible, knowing that Russia would never allow Ukraine to stay in Russia, knowing that Russia would move in 100,000 troops, 200,000 troops, whatever it takes to push Ukraine out, right? So Ukraine knew that they would be pushed back, and eventually they would have to fall back to Sudzha and defend the rivers coming up through here, the Pesel River leading up to Sudzha, and the Lokhnya River coming down here towards Unakivka. So this was the defensive barrier, and Sudzha would be the fortress. Like I said, in September of 2024, Russia would eventually come in on the flanks to try and cut the logistics leading into Sudzha once they reach the rivers. This was inevitable. Russia would eventually reach these rivers, and they would eventually try and cut in to take the supply lines. Nothing strange about it. Ukraine knew this was coming, and this is why we now see that Ukraine has prepared defensive lines within the river barrier. Obviously, this part here was not part of the equation, but they probably realized something like it could happen. And here we are, they're now holding prepared defenses, still forcing Russia to move in resources and manpower. Western analysts say there's as many as 80,000 troops on the Russian side trying to push out the Ukrainians out of Kursk at the moment. So 70,000 Russians and 10,000 North Koreans or thereabouts. So Ukraine knew this was happening. They have prepared. They planned for it before moving into Kursk, prepared for 8 months. And the thing is, obviously, if Russia pushes Ukraine out, Russia will now have 50 to 80,000 troops in Kursk ready to push further in to Ukraine itself. Ukraine knows this as well. They knew this before moving into Kursk, and they've had 8 months to prepare for it. So within the Kursk border, there is a possibility that Ukraine is preparing or has for 8 months prepared defensive lines, kill boxes ranged in every village and every piece of cover available, and waiting for the Russians to attack. So between Sumy and the border here to Kursk, this may actually be one massive trap for the Russians. This could be the modern Battle of Cannae. Basically, what happened at Cannae was that the Romans tried to defeat Hannibal, and according to legend and according to history, Hannibal had this shape basically. The Russians pushed in, and Hannibal fell back like so and trapped the Russians in the middle while outflanking them with cavalry, and the Romans got just jammed into this brilliant formation that the Carthaginians formed with this bowl-shaped defense with cavalry coming in on the flanks and surrounding the Romans altogether. So maybe we will see something like it, right? The border here with Kursk, with the Russians pushing in, and within Sumy Oblast, we have Ukrainian defenses waiting for Russia to follow the Ukrainian forces into this cauldron here, where Ukraine more than likely has prepared for 8 months a massive trap. Hopefully, is my guess. I mean, we don't know. We'll see what happens. But I wouldn't surprise me that Russia is stepping into a world of hurt here with the Ukrainians, knowing fully well this would happen eventually, and they have now prepared for 8 months a big battle to take place between Sumy and the border, especially in this forest here between Kotin and Mauritius. Would not surprise me at all. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Ukraine is obviously holding on here. Prepared defenses, they knew that this would happen, and they know that eventually Russia will try and push into these forested areas to reach Sumy. And if we jump down to Kupiansk, take a look what happens. This is on the 26th of February, but take a look what happens as we move forward. Russia has crossed the river Oskil. They're trying to take Toretsk now, pushing it to Zapadne, being a massive, credible threat to the north of Kupiansk. But what happens as we move on? Whoop, Russia's falling back in this forest that they've held for I don't know how many months. And whoop, Ukraine pushes Russia back, moving forward now in March here. And more advances from Ukraine here in the woods north of Kupiansk. And whoop, Fylovka, Ukraine is pushing back here as well, and now we have caught up with present day. Ukraine is advancing north of Kupiansk, pushing the Russians back quite clearly. Russia is having issues here at Kupiansk at the moment. And jumping down to Toretsk, this is Mayakovsk 73 maps. If we take a look at Andrew Perpetua, he has some updates in the center of town with Russia securing some of the blocks here. Nothing strange about it. Urban city fighting, it's back and forth all over the place. But as we can see here with Mayakovsk 73, Ukraine has been pushing further into the middle here between the settlements out in fields where you have forested areas where you can find cover and what have you, pushing in this way and also pushing in strongly in the north, securing some slag heaps and some entry points here along this main road into town. So Ukraine is clearly still applying a lot of pressure on Toretsk and forcing the Russians back, even if the battle in the middle of town is back and forth as we should expect. But in the outskirts, Ukraine is very much forcing the Russians back. And heading over to Pokrovsk, under Perpetua's map, as you can see, Ukraine has pushed into Shevchenko. You can see Russian airstrikes all over the place. Clearly, Russia is having trouble in Shevchenko if they're bombing the entire area. Ukraine has pushed in and they are challenging the Russians all across Shevchenko. We have some Ukrainian strikes down here. These are older geolocated destroyed vehicles as a Russian medevac is moving through town. They have located all of these vehicles, so these are older stuff. These are not recent FPV drone kills, I should say. This is interesting though. We know that Ukraine pushed into Peshane and gave the Russians a big fight here. They have pushed into Kotlina, they have pushed into Adachne and Uspenivka. If we move back here, let's see if we can see it happening. Here we have Uspenivka, right? It's contested, and this is when we have the beginning of the push into Shevchenko as well. We are in the beginning here on the 6th of March, and see here on the 8th and 7th, Uspenivka, and we have the push in Shevchenko, right? So clearly, we are seeing a push from Uspenivka, through Uspenivka, along this road, straight for Novotroitsk, right? Same thing here, Shevchenko, straight for Novotroitsk. Is this an attempt by Ukraine to do a pincer move where both pincers meet up at Novotroitsk and potentially cuts off all the Russians up here between Novotroitsk and Kotlina? Is that what's happening? Because here you have a river right here. It comes, well, you can see it moves through here, it splits off here, or a dam comes in from the north and it continues down here. So if Ukraine puts pressure along these two roads, Russia can't really support the troops up here. It's difficult for them to move supplies northward to supply the fighting up here if Ukraine applies pressure along these two roads. And eventually, should they meet up at Novotroitsk, obviously all of this is surrounded, cut off, and isolated. So very interesting to see if Ukraine pulls something off here at Pokrovsk with a big pincer move aimed at Novotroitsk. And we're now heading down to Kherson, and as you can see, this is not a quiet spot along the front line, as you will see as I move ahead. This is on the 15th of February, almost a month ago. What happened a month ago is that Russia launched an assault along this road here towards the Antonov Bridge. And here they got into, there are some video footage here of Russians moving up here, engaging Ukrainian targets all around them. These vehicles are firing off into these wooded areas as they're advancing a mechanized assault along this road, trying to secure Russian positions here. Clearly, we have a lot of Ukrainians on this island here, south of the Antonov Bridge. The Russians met heavy resistance as they crossed this bridge. and another MTLB was destroyed further back in this mechanized assault. So Ukraine has a presence here and is indeed contesting the area north of Oleshki here, south of the river Dnipro. And as we move ahead, and you'll see just the level of Russian artillery strikes in the area here as we move forward to you can see, Jesus Christ, and here we have Russian assault against Dachi, for instance, on the 24th of February. This area here is very much a combat zone south of the river Dnipro, where you have a Ukrainian presence. We don't hear much about it though for some reason. Remember when Krinky was all the rage, but quite clearly we have Ukrainian infantry here in Dachi and south towards Oleshki. Continuing forward, as you can see, things are still happening in Kherson, but then let's take a look. Russian drone attacks in Dachi. I mean, this Dachi is clearly a Ukrainian bastion south of the Dnipro here. And moving up to present day, this happens. Bridge destroyed. Ukraine launched an airstrike at this bridge where Russia has made these mechanized assaults across towards Dachi. So Ukraine has now tried to isolate this island between Oleshki and Antonivka, and here we go. This is present day. So is Ukraine trying to secure these islands right here so that they can move troops over to Dachi, spread out their influence, take control of the island and be a threat to Oleshki, or maybe move down this way towards Kryluk Island maybe, and these areas down here where they can move troops across? Because here you have blue areas. Here you have some smaller civilian harbors where you can move troops across quickly with smaller boats and what have you. Interesting to see if this bridge being destroyed by Ukraine, if that is an indication that something will build up on this island and Dachi over time. So careful optimism. I think cautious optimism is warranted. There are a couple of interesting hotspots along the front line where we see Ukraine actually turning things around and reclaiming territory, and at a couple of locations being a genuine threat to the Russians. Threatening encirclements, pincer move, coming in to cut off logistics at such as within Toretsk as they're pushing in between the settlements and what have you, threatening to come up behind and all of that good stuff. So cautious optimism. Russia may still throw 100,000 troops at the problem and overwhelm the Ukrainians and force them back. Obviously, Trump may cut all aid once again for some bullshit reason. But right now, at the moment, as it is right now, cautious optimism. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.